The stars were dying, and nobody knew how to stop it. Ambassador Kala stood in the great hall of the Galactic Council, her blue skin shimmering with fear. Around her, representatives from 12 different worlds sat in their floating chairs, all of them looking as scared as she felt. The beautiful crystal walls that usually sparkled with peaceful light now showed dark images of destroyed planets. "They took another system yesterday," Kala said, her voice shaking. "The Benson colony. 3 billion people lived there. Now there is nothing left but empty rock." The other ambassadors shifted in their seats. None of them wanted to speak about what they all knew was coming. The swarm was getting closer to their home worlds with each passing day. Elder Vex raised his crystal hand. His people, the Zephyrians, could live for 1,000 years, but he looked older than anyone had ever seen him. "How many systems have we lost now?" he asked. 47, replied Commander Neth from her water tank. Her people lived underwater and needed special equipment to attend these meetings. In just 6 months, 47 star systems completely destroyed. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the numbers, but hearing them out loud made it worse. The swarm was not just an enemy army. It was something that ate entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but stripped planets floating in space. Kala pulled up a hologram showing the galaxy. Red dots marked where the swarm had attacked. The red was spreading like a disease across the star map. "Our computer models say they will reach the core worlds in less than 2 years. After that, everything we have built will be gone. What about our defense fleets?" asked Ambassador Chun, who represented the trade routes between the outer colonies. "Gone," Neth replied flatly. "The swarm destroyed our ships like they were toys. Our energy weapons barely scratched their armor. Our best pilots could not match their flying. Our smartest computers could not predict their attacks." Elder Vex created a light pattern that meant deep sadness in his people's language. "We have tried everything. Weapons, shields, running away, even trying to talk to them. Nothing works. They do not want to negotiate. They do not want territory or resources. They just want to eat everything alive." The truth was hard to accept. For over 300 years, the Galactic Council had solved every problem through talking and working together. When the plant people of Kepler needed water, they traded with the ocean world of Aquarius. When the crystal beings had too much energy, they shared it with the metal workers of Titan Station. War was something they read about in old history books, not something that happened to civilized people. But the swarm was not civilized. It was a nightmare from the dark space between galaxies, and it was heading straight for every world they loved. "There must be something," Kala said, though she did not sound like she believed it. "Some weapon we have not tried, some strategy we have not thought of." "We have looked everywhere," said Dr. Min, the Council's chief scientist. "Every known species, every recorded technology, every military database in the galaxy. We are simply not equipped for this kind of threat." That was when Assistant Librarian Zara spoke up from the back of the room. She was young for her species, barely 200 years old, and normally she would never interrupt a council meeting. But these were not normal times. "There is one more place we could look," she said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Elder Vex's light patterns showed curiosity mixed with annoyance. "Speak, child." Zara activated her personal data pad and projected a small hologram into the center of the room. It showed a tiny blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. "This is Sol 3, sometimes called Earth. It is in the outer spiral arm, very far from here." Ambassador Chun squinted at the image. "I have never heard of this world." "Are they part of the council?" "No," Zara replied. "They are not even part of galactic civilization yet. They have barely begun to explore their own star system. But their database entry is ... unusual." She pulled up the official record. "Most species had simple entries listing their technology level, population, and trade goods. But the Earth file was different. It was covered in warning labels written in the ancient language of the first galactic explorers. Kala read the warnings out loud. Extreme caution advised when approaching this species. Deathworld origin. Unusual aggressive problem-solving tendencies. High violence potential. Recommend minimum contact protocols. Deathworld? Commander Neff asked from her tank. What does that mean? Zara brought up more data about Earth. The planet was covered in violent weather, dangerous animals, poisonous plants, and natural disasters. Most of the surface was covered by water that could drown air-breathing species, while the land had deserts that could cook you and ice caps that could freeze you solid. Most species evolve on peaceful worlds, Zara explained. Safe places where they can develop art, science, and philosophy. But some species come from death worlds, planets that are actively trying to kill everything that lives on them. She showed them pictures of Earth's animals. Creatures with claws and fangs and venom. Predators that hunted in packs. Even the plants had thorns and toxic leaves. The humans who live on this world spent millions of years fighting just to survive, Zara continued. They developed something that no other known species has. What? Elder Vex asked, his light patterns now showing intense interest. War, Zara said simply. Not just fighting for food or territory, but organized, strategic, technological war. They have been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. Their greatest achievements are not art or music or philosophy. They are weapons. She brought up images of human weapons. Not the elegant energy beams used by civilized species, but crude, brutal devices designed to destroy and kill. Explosives that could level mountains, poisons that could kill millions, even weapons that could crack planets. The council members stared in horror and fascination. These humans were everything that civilized species had evolved away from. They were violent, aggressive, and dangerous, but they were also the only species in the galaxy with experience fighting wars. You want to ask these barbarians for help? Ambassador Chun asked in disbelief. They are not barbarians, Zara said firmly. They are survivors. And survival is exactly what we need to learn. Kala looked at the star map again, watching the red dots of swarm attacks creep closer to her home world. Her people were philosophers and artists. They had never hurt another living being in their entire history. The idea of asking violent aliens for help went against everything she believed in. But her people were going to die if something did not change. How do we contact them? She asked quietly. Zara smiled for the first time in months. Very carefully. The message from the Galactic Council reached Earth on a Tuesday morning while Admiral Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee at Luna Station. The quantum transmission came through the Deep Space Monitoring Array, and at first, nobody believed it was real. Sir, you need to see this, said Lieutenant Kate Brooks, rushing into Morrison's office with a data pad. We just received a message from ... from aliens. Morrison nearly choked on his coffee. Aliens? Are you sure it's not some kind of joke? The transmission came through quantum channels we don't even understand yet, Brooks replied. The math checks out. This is real. Morrison took the pad and read the message. It was translated into English by some kind of universal communication system, but the meaning was clear. An entire galaxy was being destroyed by something called the Swarm, and they wanted Earth's help. They're asking for military advisors. Morrison said slowly, they think we can help them fight. Should we contact the president? Brooks asked. Morrison was already reaching for his secure phone. Get me the White House, now. 3 hours later, Morrison stood in the Situation Room under the White House, briefing President Collins and her cabinet. The room was full of generals, scientists, and politicians, all trying to process the impossible news that humanity was not alone in the universe. What do we know about these council species? Asked Secretary of Defense Martin Clark. Dr. Susan Price, the President's science advisor, pulled up holographic displays of the alien races. From what we can tell, they're all peaceful civilizations. No major wars in their recorded history. They've built their entire society around cooperation and trade. And now something is trying to eat them all, President Collins said grimly. That's about the size of it, Morrison agreed. They've lost 47 star systems in 6 months. Their military forces are designed for peacekeeping, not actual war. They're desperate. General Paul Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. What kind of enemy are we talking about? Morrison activated another display showing the few images the aliens had sent of the swarm. The creatures looked like giant insects crossed with spaceships, all claws and armor and weaponry. Hive-minded species from outside the galaxy. They consume everything organic and leave dead worlds behind. The aliens can't fight them because they've never learned how to fight anything. And they think we can help because we're good at fighting, President Collins said. More than good, Morrison replied. We're the only species they've found that has a military history. While they were building art galleries and trading posts, we were building weapons and learning strategy. The room fell quiet as everyone considered the implications. Humanity had spent centuries trying to move past its violent history. Wars, genocide, weapons of mass destruction. These were the dark chapters they wanted to forget. Now aliens were asking them to embrace those very skills. Secretary Clark spoke first. How many ships can we send? That's the thing, Morrison said with a grim smile. I don't think they understand what they're asking for. They want a few advisors to help with strategy. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. President Collins nodded slowly. Prepare the first expeditionary fleet. 2 weeks later, the human fleet arrived at Proxima Refuge, the aliens' emergency command center. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the flagship UES Vengeance, a massive battleship that looked nothing like the elegant alien vessels floating nearby. Look at their ships, said Colonel Pete Williams, Rodriguez's tactical officer. They're beautiful, like works of art. And completely useless in a fight, Rodriguez replied, studying the alien designs through the viewport. No armor minimal. Weapons, everything designed for looks instead of function. Dr. Amy Chun, the fleet's alien expert, was monitoring the communication channels. They're panicking, she reported. Our ships are causing quite a stir. I don't think they expected us to bring weapons. The first meeting took place on Ambassador Kalla's ship, a crystalline vessel that seemed to be grown rather than built. Rodriguez arrived with Williams and Chun, all of them wearing their dress uniforms and trying to look diplomatic. Kalla greeted them in the ship's main chamber, a beautiful room with walls that showed the stars outside. With her were representatives from several other species, tall, thin beings with blue skin, creatures that looked like living crystals, and others that Rodriguez couldn't even identify. We are grateful that you responded to our call for help, Kalla said, her voice somehow appearing directly in their minds. We hoped you could provide advice on military strategy and perhaps share some defensive technologies. Rodriguez looked at Williams, who raised an eyebrow. Ambassador, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't come here to give advice. We came here to fight. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. Elder Vex, the crystal being, spoke next. Fight? We had hoped to find a peaceful solution. Violence goes against everything we believe in. Violence goes against most natural instincts, Williams replied calmly. That's exactly why it works so well. Dr. Chun activated her portable holodisplay and began showing images from human military history. Perhaps we should explain what we've learned about warfare over the past few thousand years. You mentioned that the swarm uses coordinated tactics. Yes, Kalla replied. They move as one mind, perfectly organized, completely ruthless. We've fought enemies like that before, Rodriguez said. Hive minds are actually easier to defeat once you understand their weaknesses. You disrupt their communication, overload their decision-making systems, and introduce chaos into their perfect order. The display showed human battles against artificial intelligence networks during the AI wars. The humans spoke about warfare like it was a science, discussing tactics and strategies with the same calm precision that the aliens used to talk about art or philosophy. But surely there must be a way to negotiate, Kala protested. Some common ground we can find? Ambassador, Chun said gently. We have a saying on Earth, when someone is trying to eat you, talking time is over. From what you've told us, the swarm doesn't want your territory or your resources. They want your biomass. They want to consume every living thing in the galaxy. Which brings us to our first recommendation, Williams added. Stop trying to save everyone. Start deciding who you can afford to lose. The silence that followed was complete. The idea of deliberately sacrificing their own people was so alien to these species that they couldn't even process it. Rodriguez stood up, her posture conveying the kind of authority that needed no translation. You asked for our help. This is what human help looks like. We don't just fight to survive, we fight to win. And winning sometimes means making choices that would be unthinkable in peacetime. She activated a tactical display showing the swarm's movement patterns. They're following predictable resource routes. We can use that against them. We evacuate these systems, fill them with automated weapons, and turn their own momentum into a trap. You would sacrifice entire worlds? Asked another alien, his blue skin now pale with shock. We would sacrifice empty worlds to save full ones, Williams corrected. That's called strategy. Commander Neth spoke from her mobile water tank. But how can you live with such decisions? How do you sleep at night knowing you chose to let people die? Rodriguez met her alien eyes. Commander, we sleep at night because we make the hard choices that keep our people alive. Every human military officer learns this lesson. Sometimes, the only way to save lives is to spend lives. As the meeting continued, more reports came in of swarm attacks. 3 more systems had fallen while they were talking. The aliens were starting to realize that their beautiful, peaceful way of life was not going to survive this war. What do you need from us? Kala asked finally. Complete tactical authority, Rodriguez replied. No interference, no second-guessing, no committee decisions. When we say evacuate a system, you evacuate. When we say attack, you attack. War is not a democracy. The aliens looked at each other, communicating in ways the humans couldn't understand. Finally, Kala nodded. Very well. But please remember, we are not warriors. We are asking you to save our civilization, but we also need you to help us remain civilized. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Ambassador, that's exactly why Earth sent Deathworlders instead of diplomats. The first real battle happened 3 days later at the mining world of Kepler 452b. The swarm had detected the planet's rich metal deposits and was moving in with a full invasion force. For the aliens, this was another disaster waiting to happen. For the humans, it was exactly what they had been waiting for. Commander Alex Turner led the 3rd fighter wing into battle with tactics that made the alien observers think he had lost his mind. Instead of forming neat battle lines like civilized species, Turner's pilots dove straight into the middle of the swarm formation. Human squadron, you are flying directly into enemy fire, called Tactical Coordinator Zeth from his command ship. You must maintain safe distance and use coordinated attacks. Negative control, Turner replied, spinning his fighter between 2 swarm bioships. Safe distance is for people who want to lose slowly. We prefer to win quickly. The human fighters moved like they were dancing with death. They flew in patterns that seemed random, firing in all directions at once, sometimes shooting so close to their own allies that the aliens were sure they would hit each other. But they never did. The human pilots had trained for years in asteroid fields and debris clouds, places where death could come from any direction. Their targeting computers tracked every friendly ship and automatically adjusted their weapons to avoid hitting allies. The purgating allies. Swarm creatures, evolved for simple hunting and pack tactics, could not handle this kind of chaos. Their hive mind worked perfectly when fighting enemies who acted predictably. But humans were anything but predictable. "How are they doing that?" asked Elder Vex, watching the battle from the command center. His crystal body was flashing colors that meant complete confusion. Dr. Chun monitored the tactical displays. "They're using three-dimensional combat doctrine. Most space battles happen on a single plane, like ships fighting on an ocean. But humans think of space as a sphere where threats can come from everywhere at once." Turner's wings split apart and regrouped in ways that violated every rule of space combat the aliens knew. One moment they were attacking from above, the next they were shooting up from below. The swarm's coordination began to break down as they tried to track targets that kept changing direction and altitude. "Target the big one," Turner called to his pilots, pointing at a massive bioship that was coordinating the swarm attack. "Bravo! Team, distraction run. Charlie team with me." Half the human fighters flew straight at the bioship's weapons, drawing its fire and attention. Meanwhile, Turner and the rest approached from its blind spot, moving so fast that the creature's sensors could barely track them. "Firing solution locked," reported Lieutenant Sam Brooks. "But sir, that thing is huge. Our missiles won't do much." "Damage? Who said anything about missiles?" Turner replied. "Ramming speed." The aliens watching the battle could not believe what they were seeing. Turner's fighter accelerated directly toward the bioship's main body, its engines glowing white-hot. At the last second, he ejected from his cockpit while his fighter, loaded with explosives, punched through the creature's armor and detonated inside its body. The bioship exploded from within, taking out 3 smaller swarm units with it, Turner's. Escape pod was picked up by another human pilot, and he was back in a new fighter within an hour. "You used your ship as a weapon," Ambassador Kala said in shock. "You could have died." "Could have," Turner agreed, checking his new fighter's systems. "But I didn't. And now that bioship is dead instead of eating your miners." While the fighters were dealing with the small swarm units, Captain Steve Parker commanded the heavy cruiser U.S. Relentless against the swarm's biotitans. These creatures were the size of cities, covered in thick armor that could resist most energy weapons. "Conventional weapons are not effective against those things," warned Commander Neth from her observation post. "Our most powerful lasers barely scratch their surface." "Good thing we don't use conventional weapons," Parker replied. "Weapons officer, load kinetic penetrators, full spread." Lieutenant Helen Murphy worked the weapons console. "Kinetic rounds loaded, sir. Tungsten carbide slugs, .8 light speed. Fire all tubes." The Relentless launched 12 projectiles that looked like simple metal rods. But these rods were traveling at nearly the speed of light, and when they hit the Biotitan, they struck with the force of nuclear weapons. Instead of exploding on the surface like energy weapons, the kinetic rounds punched completely through the creature's body. The Biotitan writhed in space as massive holes appeared in its structure, venting atmosphere and biological fluids into the vacuum. "It's still alive," Murphy reported. "Damage assessment shows it's trying to regenerate. Then we'll hit it again," Parker said calmly. "And again, and again, until it's dead." The second volley of kinetic rounds struck the same wounds, widening them and causing cascading damage throughout the Biotitan structure. The creature's own size worked against it. The bigger it was, the harder it fell. Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Shun was analyzing the swarm's communication patterns from her science station aboard the flagship. What she discovered changed everything. "Captain Rodriguez, I'm detecting quantum entanglement signatures in their neural networks," she reported. The entire swarm isn't just connected locally, they're sharing information instantly across interstellar distances. Rodriguez studied the data. You mean every swarm unit in the galaxy knows what every other unit is doing? Exactly. That's how they coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. But it also gives us a target. Chun's idea was so dangerous that even the humans found it ambitious. She wanted to create an information weapon, a computer virus designed to spread through the swarm's quantum communication network and overload their collective consciousness. You're talking about attacking their minds, Elder Vex said when Chin explained the plan. That sounds like genocide. With respect, Elder, replied Colonel Kate Robinson, the fleet's intelligence officer. They're already committing genocide against every other species in the galaxy. We're just returning the favor. But how can we maintain our moral standards if we use the same methods as our enemies? Asked Ambassador Kala. Dr. Chun looked up from her computer. Ambassador, let me tell you something we learned from our own history. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become something the monster fears more than death. She showed them images from human wars, battles where small groups held off massive armies, soldiers who sacrificed themselves to save others, entire cities that fought to the last person rather than surrender. Every one of these battles was lost by the people defending, Chun continued. But they bought time for others to escape. They inspired resistance movements. They taught us that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to pay any price for victory. The Virus Project took weeks to develop, combining human information warfare techniques with alien quantum technology. When they tested it on an isolated swarm patrol, the results were better than anyone had hoped. The infected swarm units began attacking each other, their perfect coordination replaced by chaotic, contradictory commands. Within hours, the entire patrol had destroyed itself in a frenzy of friendly fire. It works, Chun reported. But to deploy it galaxy-wide, we need to get close to their main hive clusters. Captain Rodriguez smiled the kind of smile that made her enemies nervous. Getting close to heavily defended targets is what humans do best. The aliens were beginning to understand what they had asked for when they called Earth for help. Humans didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win, no matter what it cost. They turned their own ships into weapons, used physics itself as ammunition, and created viruses that could drive entire species insane. They were exactly what the galaxy needed to fight the swarm. They were also the most terrifying. All eyes the peaceful species had ever encountered, but as more reports came in of swarm defeats, the aliens began to realize something important. These violent, dangerous humans were not fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting to save civilizations they had never met, to protect people who were nothing like them. The Deathworlders had come to save the galaxy, and they were very, very good at their job. The final battle for the galaxy began in the Vega system, where the swarm had built their largest hive cluster. This was not just another attack, this was the heart of the enemy, a collection of bioworlds that controlled every swarm unit across 17 star systems. Admiral Morrison arrived with reinforcements from Earth. The Second Fleet, commanded by Admiral Patricia Hayes, brought fresh ships and crews. The Experimental Deep Strike Battalion, led by Colonel Ryan Torres, carried weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Phase 1 is orbital bombardment, Morrison explained to the gathered alien commanders. We use kinetic weapons to break their outer defenses. Phase 2 is system denial, added Admiral Hayes. We plant quantum mines on their supply routes and use gravity bombs to destroy their staging areas. Phase 3, Colonel Torres continued, is what we call direct pest control. We land troops on their hive worlds and finish the job. The aliens stared at the human officers in disbelief. Ambassador Kala spoke for all of them. You want to land soldiers on swarm worlds? The atmosphere is poison, the gravity is crushing, and the surface is covered with millions of hostile creatures. Colonel Torres, who had fought on the toxic moons of Jupiter, just shrugged. "Ma'am, I grew up on Earth. Poison air, crushing gravity. And things trying to kill me is pretty much a normal Tuesday." The assault began with the humans doing what they did best, turning physics into a weapon. The kinetic bombardment from orbit sent tungsten rods screaming down at the hive worlds at nearly light speed. Each impact hit with the force of a nuclear bomb, cracking the biostructures that covered the planet's surfaces, but the swarm was ready for them. Biotitans rose from the planet's surface, launching themselves into space to fight the human fleet. Flying fortresses the size of mountains, covered in weapons that could cut through ship armor like paper. "Incoming Biotitans," reported Captain Mike Davis from his destroyer. "Count his ... well a lot." "All ships, engage at will," Admiral Morrison commanded. "Remember, they're big and tough, but they're not smart. Use that against them." The space battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships moved like sharks through water, fast and deadly, while the Biotitans lumbered after them like angry whales. But the swarm's size advantage meant nothing when human pilots could predict their movements and stay out of reach. Commander Lisa Johnson led a squadron of bombers straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Her target was the command Biotitan, a creature so large it had its own gravity field. "Bravo Squadron, distraction run," she called. "Make them think you're the real threat." Half her ships peeled off to attack the Biotitan's weapons, drawing its attention. Meanwhile, Johnson and her remaining bombers approached from below, where the creature's sensors were weakest. "Payload ready," reported her weapons officer. "Quantum virus loaded and armed." "Take us in close," Johnson ordered. "We need to get this into their communication center." Her bomber dove toward the Biotitan's main body, dodging defensive fire that lit up space around them. At the last second, she released the virus payload and pulled away, watching as the quantum weapon disappeared into the creature's organic hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Biotitan began to convulse, its movements becoming erratic and uncontrolled. The virus was spreading through its neural network, carrying chaos into the swarm's perfect order. "It's working," Chun reported from the flagship. "The virus is jumping to other units through their quantum links." Across the battlefield, swarm units began attacking each other as conflicting commands flooded their shared consciousness. Biotitans turned their weapons on their own allies. Fighter swarms broke formation and scattered in random directions, but the space battle was only the beginning. To completely destroy the swarm, human ground forces needed to reach the central hive complexes on the planet's surface. Sergeant Mike Davis led the first assault wave down to the primary hive world. The dropships cut through the poisonous atmosphere while defensive fire tried to swat them from the sky. When they finally landed, Davis and his squad found themselves in a nightmare landscape of living architecture and hostile terrain. "Contact." "Front," Davis called, opening fire with his heavy assault rifle. Swarm warriors poured out of the organic tunnels, their claws and fangs gleaming in the alien light. "Remember, these things are tough, but they're not smart. Use their numbers against them." The human soldiers fought like they had been born for this kind of war. They used shaped charges to collapse tunnel systems on top of advancing enemies. They deployed chemical weapons that targeted the swarm's breathing organs. They even used the planet's volcanic activity, triggering eruptions that buried entire hive sections under molten rock. Private Lisa Cooper carried the main virus payload deep into the hive complex. Her mission was to reach the central communication node and upload the quantum weapon directly into the swarm's galactic network. When a massive Biotitan blocked her path in the final tunnel, Cooper didn't hesitate. She activated her suit's fusion power cell in overload mode and ran straight at the creature. The resulting explosion cleared the tunnel and allowed her team to complete the mission. Her sacrifice was not unusual. Throughout the assault, human soldiers showed a casual attitude toward death that amazed and horrified their alien allies. They didn't fight just to survive, they fought to complete their objectives, regardless of the cost. When the virus finally reached the swarm's primary communication hub, the effect was immediate and galaxy-wide. Every swarm unit across 17 star systems suddenly lost coordination. Hive minds that had operated with perfect unity for millions of years dissolved into chaos and madness. The cleanup took months. But without their quantum communication network, individual swarm units were no match for conventional forces. The Council species, guided by human tactical doctrine, systematically eliminated the remaining threats. In the aftermath, as the galaxy celebrated its salvation, Ambassador Kayla met with Admiral Morrison aboard the UE's Vengeance. The ship's viewing deck looked out over the liberated worlds, where new life was already beginning to grow on planets that had been stripped bare. "We owe you a debt that can never be repaid," Kayla said. "But I must ask, how do your people live with such violence? How do you stay human while using such brutal methods?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "Ambassador, humanity spent millions of years learning to survive on a world that was actively trying to kill us. We developed violence not because we're evil, but because it was the only choice besides extinction." He gestured toward the tactical displays showing the freed star systems. "What you call brutal, we call necessary. What you call inhuman, we call effective. We don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because we're very good at it. And that's why," he continued, "when peaceful civilizations face threats they can't handle, they call the Deathworlders. Because sometimes the only thing that can stop a monster is something that scares the monster." As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, they left behind more than just military victory. They had shown the galaxy a new way of thinking about survival. Sometimes peace could only be preserved through the threat of overwhelming violence. The Council species would spend decades studying human military doctrine, trying to understand how one species could be both the most helpful and most terrifying force they had ever encountered. But they would never face an existential threat alone again. Because now they knew that somewhere in the galaxy, there was a blue world full of Deathworlders who had turned survival into an art form. The swarm was extinct. The galaxy was safe. And humanity had proven once again that when civilized people needed help, Earth didn't send diplomats or advisors. Earth sent Deathworlders.